All right, good evening. We are going to call the meeting to order. Thank you all for coming tonight. It is 6:04 p.m. We will move forward with roll call. Mr. Gaskins, if you would conduct roll call for us.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Davis,
Here.
Miss Gallagher,
Here.
Miss Davis,
Here.
Dr. Yeager, Dr. Gant,
Here.
Dr. Maddox, Dr. Dykeman,
Here.
Dr. Anderson, and Miss Hull.
Here. Okay, thank you. We do have a quorum, so we will move forward with item number 3, and this is our silent meditation and pledge of allegiance. If you're able to join us, please stand for the pledge, or for a moment of silent meditation. I'm sorry, first. Okay, and if you would join us with the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We are going to move forward with item 2, and these are our recognitions, awards, and presentations. The first item is district recognitions. Mr. Gaskins?
Yes, ma'am. I'll ask Dr. Julian Watley to come up and do our Employee of the Month.
It brings me great pleasure to say that our Employee of the Month is Angela Gay, a school social worker out of my division. Yay! I'm excited. Slide. Ms. Gay is invaluable to the Stroud community. She appreciates the importance of cultivating and maintaining positive working relationships with students, staff, families, and community resources. We all appreciate her sense of urgency and overall commitment to serving the children and the families of our community. Ms. Gay's unwavering dedication to HB Stroud makes a long-lasting positive impact on the entire Superstar Nation. It is an honor to work with her, and we are Stroud proud. She is a part of our team. Stacy Carson, Dr. Stacy Carson, the principal, and I echo everything Stacy says here. She is an amazing, amazing social worker, goes above and beyond for our students, and I'm just glad that she got this award. Come on up, Angela.
Thank you so much for this recognition, and I think Dr. Carson is a privilege to serve Clark County Schools. And we work very hard on behalf of our students and families, and we do our best to make sure our children have everything they need to be academically successful. Thank you so much.
And Dr. Gant, that concludes our recognitions for tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Gaskins, and congratulations again, Angela. We'll move forward to item 2, and excuse me, this is our National Mentoring Month, and so Mr. Joe Elrick will be speaking.
Is it okay if I remove my mask? Well, thank you for having me. It's nice to be here. I'm Joe Ehrlich. I'm the Executive Director of the Clark County Mentor Program. Thank you to Mr. Gaskins, the board, the administrative team. See some familiar faces here and some new faces. Ms. Davis is a huge supporter of ours. She sends a lot of volunteers our way. Mr. Dexter Fisher served on our board. So it's just wonderful to be here. I've wanted to have this opportunity for a while, so I thank you. So some of you may be aware it's National Mentoring Month. So I just wanted to take the opportunity to say hello and introduce our program in case any of you are not familiar with us. Before sharing a little about our program, and maybe this is what I'm most passionate about this evening, is I just first like to give a shout out to the entire school district team. In my role, I work with them on a daily basis. It's been an extraordinarily challenging time. Thank you to the board for your leadership. I have had nothing but positive experiences from the person staffing the front desk all the way up to Dr. Thomas and her administrative team. So thank you for all you do. Back to mentorship and the Clark County Mentor Program. It might surprise some of you to know that we're in our 31st year. Yeah. So we were established in 1991 as a formal partnership between the Athens Area Chamber of Commerce and the Clark County School District. During our 31-year history, the Clark County School District is the only partner we've served. We exist solely to serve students in the Clark County School District, and I'm going to return to that point in a moment. As for our program's formal mission, it's to recruit, train, and support community volunteers to mentor Clark County School District children to help them reach their full potential. In plain language, we're here to give students in our community extra support. Research shows that steady, consistent, caring adult relationships are more important than ever, given COVID, summer learning loss, the achievement gap. We all are familiar with these issues. I'd also like to point out that in no way are we trying to replace these students' families, and we recognize how much their teachers and counselors are pouring into them, but it takes a village, especially during times like these. So our program's here to provide a little extra boost and to help in any way that we can. So over the course of our 31-year history, we're proud to have mentored thousands of students in the Clark County School District in all 21 schools. Currently, we have 227 students enrolled in our program and another 95 students on our waiting list. I should note that our wait list of 95 students is based on very little marketing amongst the school counselors, just given COVID and current circumstances. If we were actively encouraging school counselors to make referrals, I think demand for our program would be well north of 500 students. So as much as we'd like to serve more students, I mean, it would be a long-term goal of ours to serve 500 plus students. The one thing that's holding us back is staffing. It takes a lot of behind the scenes work to recruit, train, coordinate, and support our volunteers based on national best practices that are in place for safety and quality mentoring. We're near capacity until we can increase staffing, which of course gets us back to funding. Don't worry. I'm not here to ask for money from the school district, but I'd be remiss to not take this opportunity to plant a seed with the board, with community members, to help spread the word amongst your personal networks that we're an organization worthy of community support, and we would thank you for that. So just 2 or 3 minutes more. Let me just briefly touch on some high-level points to help familiarize you with our program. I should emphasize that we're designed as an in-school mentoring program. Now, like everybody else, we've had to pivot 18 different ways over the past 2 years, but our bread and butter is as an in-school mentoring program, meaning that our community volunteers mentor the students in school. It could be before school, recess, lunch break, whatever works for the child's particular schedule. So what do mentors and mentees do together during visits? I mean, broadly speaking, social emotional support. That'd be like asking a parent, what do you do with your kids? Depends on the day, depends on the need, depends on the age, but they could enjoy each other's company at lunch, set goals, talk about college and career planning, discuss challenges or obstacles that they're facing, play games, shoot hoops, read, help with schoolwork. So whatever the child needs, we try not to be cookie cutter. We're there to support. I should also mention that our volunteer mentors are not currently permitted by district administration to conduct in-school visits due to the district returning to a limited visitor protocol based on COVID levels. 100% agree with that decision. No issues with it. Totally agree. I only bring it up because our mentors are chomping at the bit to return as soon as it's safe. So once your health professionals advise you that it's safe, we're ready to get back in there. In the meantime, we're in touch. Our mentors and mentees are in touch via phone, text, email, however they can maintain that relationship. So one other thing I should mention is the school district and Mr. Fisher and his team were nice enough to recently accommodate us in some school district space. We were over on Old Gaines School Road, but we've happily made way for the new Early Learning Center, which is much needed in the community. But if the opportunity ever does present itself in the future, it is very helpful to be co-located so we can share resources and work toward our mutual goals. So in closing, if you were going to take anything away from me being here today, I'd really like to underscore that we exist solely to serve students in Athens, Clarke County. Our nonprofit has no ancillary services. This is all we do. We're proud to be the school district's partner, and we look forward to doing that in the years to come. Our mentors are ready to return, as I said. So you need to do what you need to do to keep everyone safe, and we respect that. But we're not going anywhere, and we're here, and we're ready when you're ready. And probably the last thing I'd like to say is I know as board members, administrators, a lot of you field questions like, well, how can I get involved? How can I help the school district? Volunteer to be a mentor. I circulated some handouts. It's an online form. It's an easy application process. So that's really sort of a slam dunk if anyone's asking you how they can get involved and how they can support our students. So thank you for letting me present, and be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we will move forward with any board member announcements, any updates or recognitions. If you recall, this is one of the areas, the new areas that we've added to the agenda. So the floor is open. Oh, okay, hold on, Dr. Maddox. Okay. Dr. Maddox?
Dr. Dyckman will assist me. I hate that I can't be in person tonight, but we would like to salute you, Dr. Gant, for taking on the helm of chairing this board, first as interim and then moving into full chairmanship for the last 2 years. So we really thank you for your dedication to our students and dedication to keeping us together as best you could. And so we salute you and we honor you. And this plaque is just a small token of how much we value you and all that you've done as leading and chairing our board. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Maddox and board colleagues. Your words mean a great deal, and I do know that this has been a collective effort. I think all of us share a lot of that responsibility as well as a lot of the praise in the progress that we've made. And so definitely look forward, all of us, I think, continue to look forward to, the progress that we'll continue to make. So thank you so much.
Yes.
Any additional comments or announcements from board members? Mr. Davis?
I've been taking every opportunity to do this because I think it's so important for the public to know as much as possible. You know, we don't really have a strong media presence on television and that type of thing. But anyway, this is going to be my last tour of duty as board on the school board. And I won't be running again. And I just wanted to throw out some dates to the public. March the 11th is the last day to declare your interest in becoming a school board member for District 1. Actually, for any office, nonpartisan office in Clark County. But anyway, that's March the 11th. And then the election will be April 25th. And if there's a runoff, it will be, I think, about 2 weeks after that. So anyway, I encourage folks to think about, if you're in District 1, if you would be interested in having the experience of running on the school board, you know, feel free to call me. My number's on the website. You can email me. We can get together, probably virtually or outside, to talk about what's involved. But this will finish up 32 years in K-12 education with a 4-year gap after my retirement in 2011 before I ran for the school board. But anyway, it's been a real, it's been an interesting ride, and I've enjoyed it to some degree. And and the challenges I've appreciated to some degree. And, you know, I look forward to working with someone else who decides they want to represent District 1. And the maps may tweak a little bit. We have not had the school board maps come out yet, but anyway, I'm hopefully will be pretty much the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davis, and definitely grateful for your time in K-12 education. Thank you. Any other announcements from board colleagues before we move forward? Okay. All right, we are going to move to item 3, and this is to amend and or adopt the agenda that we have before us. The floor is open.
Can I ask Mr. Pruitt a question before?
Sure.
Okay, so for number 11.3, which says approve RFP process for superintendent search, so that's the action item currently, and if that does not get approved, is it possible to make a motion for a different action, or would we do that now?
Yeah, I actually thought about that when I looked at the agenda. And so if the decision is not to do an RFP, but do some other action to get superintendent search, I think that's fine.
That falls under the same, okay, thank you.
And that is the same for policy BBA revised? Am I right? Is that the one, the term limits policy?
Ms. Davis, could you speak up just a little bit?
I'm saying, is that the same for policy BBA revised?
Like if there's
So
a
we're just going to
different,
have a conversation about that? It's an action item, or is this a straight up and down vote?
my interpretation, Mr. Pruitt, if you could assist, but my interpretation is that policy BBA revised would be a straight up and down vote, of course, unless there's like a substitute motion or something like that in that.
That's what I anticipate. I mean, there's a particular revision, I think, in mind. The motion could be for any revision or simply not revise it at all.
And so in our work session, I specifically asked about being able to suspend the rules. So that would definitely not fall under here, or it would, is my question.
Well, and so if a board member wishes to take action immediately on that, and not put it out in the usual 4 weeks,
Right.
then we would go back to policy BBC, which says the motion would be to suspend the rules and revise Now, you could split that up into two motions, one to suspend the rules, which requires a 2/3 vote, just to consider it, and then the motion to actually make the change would be the second motion and would go up or down on a majority vote.
So BBC is the policy that I would need to,
Yeah, BBC.
BBC. Okay, so then I do have an amendment.
Okay, so is there a motion for an amendment, Ms. Davis? Is that what I
Yes,
understand?
I would like to move that we add I guess this would be an action item. And I'm surprised that it didn't make it to the agenda. Add an action item to suspend the rules and policy BBC to allow the president, the current president to extend her term. One more time. So I want to make sure, because I think I got confused. BBC is our election policy, is that right? Or is BBA our election policy? BBA. So I want to suspend the rule on BBA for this one term. So you're saying that is not something that can be considered in action items?
So that's the method that you would use for an action item for DBA.
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, and so what I'm hearing is that, so
I
that
don't have
motion.
to, I don't have to do another amendment,
Okay,
is what I'm hearing.
okay, the floor is open for amending or adopting the agenda for a motion.
I move we adopt the agenda as written.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Davis and then a second by Ms. Hull. Any further discussion or questions? Okay, all in favor of adopting the agenda, if you would say aye and raise your hands. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And any abstaining? Okay, that motion carries. And so we will move forward now with our agenda as printed. Item 4, public comments. And just a reminder from the policy for public comments to keep the comments at 3 minutes, that's the limit, and that any type of personal attacks on individuals will not be tolerated. And so you'll be asked to discontinue your public comments at that time. I have, I think, the most updated list, and we will begin with Tad McMillan.
And you can take your mask off when you're speaking, is that right, or no? You can, thank you. Let's get it over here. Good evening. I'm going to read just so I can get it in under 3 minutes. My name's Tad McMillan, and I do want to start out and just thank the school board for your community service. I know it's hard work, and thank you for what you do. Like many others, I'm sure tonight I want to talk to you quickly about Chris Penley. My objective is just to enlighten you about the kind of school leader and the person that he is, and that the district has maligned by this decision. I just want you to know more about Mr. Penley so you'll realize what a loss to Clark Middle his removal imparts. I worked for Clark Middle for 32 years, serving as a principal both at Barrow and Clark Middle for over 18 years. And currently, I'm an assistant professor of education at Piedmont, teaching classes on budget, assessment, and leadership. And strangely enough, we use examples from Mr. Penley's work in our leadership classes of what exemplary leadership is. Mr. Penley's a remarkable person, a gifted leader. I first came to know him when he worked at the district office, and all of us, I can say as leaders, when we came to attend something that he was presenting, we knew it would be relevant and worthwhile and help us do our jobs. He could talk about anything from gifted education to assessment to social justice and equity. So when he applied for the job at Clark Middle, we were thrilled. And during the interviews, I remember Dr. Lanou, the superintendent at the time, saying that if Mr. Penley doesn't know how to do something, he'll learn and become an expert at it. And when he came to Clark Middle, that was our experience. He's a quick study. He's passionate about his work. He builds relationships with students. He's just extremely competent in all areas of the work. And his influence in supporting restorative justice and helping our leadership and faculty meetings run more smoothly and in working with parents was positive and impactful from the beginning. He knows children and he knows how to build systems that support them. Mr. Penley has a skill for thinking deeply about initiatives or problems and working with the stakeholders to implement and make this situation better. He's also just a deeply ethical person, and the way he conducts himself sets an example for us all when I worked with him and made our school a better place just because he was there. He's also, I'll just say, probably the kindest, most competent school leader that I've ever met. So my goal was just to give a perspective on Mr. Penley, his character, his sublime effectiveness, and his impact as a school leader. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Sandy, is it Cedarbaum?
Okay. Hi, my name is Sandy Cedarbaum, and I'm the president of the Clark Middle School PTA. On Tuesday evening this week, we hosted a meeting for the CMS community to voice their concerns to Mr. Gaskins and Dr. Blankenship regarding the abrupt removal of our principal, Mr. Penley. The meeting lasted over 2 hours, and over 120 people attended, including teachers, staff, parents, former parents, and community members. A common theme throughout many comments was the mistrust the district caused in the way in which Mr. Penley was removed. Mr. Gaskins stated that he understands the broken relationship this caused and the need for it to be mended. Repeatedly, the question was asked as to why Mr. Penley had to be removed this way, and repeatedly it was answered that we cannot be told the reason. This lack of basic answers was brought up multiple times as a reason for this mistrust, resulting in the disbelief that the district was trying very hard to mend these fractured relationships. There was also a strong concern regarding the effect that this lack of reason had on Mr. Penley and his family. To remove a school leader in such a dramatic way, midway through the year, without reason, created a situation where the public had to create their own reasons, which in turn has marred the reputation of a respected leader. Multiple teachers had the courage to speak, and their comments relayed a feeling of fear that if their leader could be removed without warning or reason, should they worry that this might happen to them as well. One teacher asked how they would know if they could be in trouble or would be removed, and the response was that their principal would help guide them. But how can they rely on the principal's guidance if that leader could be removed without reason? Our focus through the meeting had been on the effect of the CMS teachers, students, staff, and community, but what about the effect on the Classic City High School community? In moving Dr. Gorham to CMS, they too have lost their school leader without notice. Mr. Penley's abrupt removal has now caused 2 schools to become destabilized during a pandemic. Dr. Thomas removed Mr. Penley because she said she lost confidence in his ability to lead. Is it not ironic that there should be such a lack of confidence in the district heads after this action? I would like the board to call an executive session to discuss the missteps Dr. Thomas has taken in the removal of Mr. Penley, and quite honestly discuss the lack of district policy on reassigning school leaders. While I understand that you only have the authority over the superintendent, there is also a concern on the lack of oversight over the acting superintendent. How will Mr. Gaskins be held accountable while he is in this role? Thank you.
Thank you. Chris Mojak?
Hello, my name is Chris Mojak, and I'm a parent, a mentor, PTA member at Clark Middle, and LSGT member at Clark Central. Like all of you, I'm committed to support the kids in this district. Last night, I participated in an informal, district-wide LSGT coalition meeting with almost 50 LSGT members. This included principals, teachers, neighborhood leaders, and parents to discuss the recent leadership changes. We came together because the communities we represent want answers, and we're committed to getting them. The general tone of the meeting was one of concern. Concern that because it's not clear how this happened, it could happen at any school. In a December meeting with Dr. Thomas and Mr. Gaskins, we were told that the timing of Principal Penley's removal, with 1 day left before winter break, was intentionally designed to stabilize the school community. How is the sudden removal of 2 principals a stabilizing move? I didn't feel stability. I felt fear. The district has long been governed by fear. Fear of the white flight to surrounding districts. Fear that certain families with the resources to do so would leave our community. The fear keeps us from making necessary changes. Time and time again, we're told it's in the best interest of all students to keep these families happy. If they left, our resources will decline. I see the irony in me, a white parent making demands after my principal was taken away from my kids. But when I see white families ignore recorded fights between Black and Hispanic students, but come here and call a Black child an attempted murderer following an incident with a white child, or I see families yell for equity until their kids' gifted classes are redesigned to give more students access to enrichment, or I see a school like Classic City destabilized by removing their strong leader to ensure the families of Normaltown, Boulevard, 5 Points are served at CMS, I feel compelled to speak up. As a start, I also request that you call an executive session to discuss the sudden leadership changes at Classic City and Clark Middle School and report your findings to the community. I also ask that you commit to better ways to include all stakeholders in your process of developing policies that'll lead to procedures that ensure what happened at Classic City, at Clark Middle School, at Cole and Cedar before it, don't happen again. Thank you.
Thank you. Laura McAlvin.
Good evening. My name is Laura Miriam McAlvin. Last time I spoke here, I spoke quickly, so I'm going to try to slow myself down a little bit this time. So my name is Laura Miriam McAlvin. It's my second time coming to this school year. I have a son in 4th grade at Barrow Elementary. I have another son that I'm homeschooling this year, and 2 other children at home as well. This is my second term serving on my school's LSGT, and I'm also on the PTA executive board. I am here tonight to address the staffing shortages plaguing our district, which precipitated your decision to make 4 schools virtual. When I got the email that these schools are moving online, I felt frustration for those families who are immediately affected, knowing that it might be any of us in the near future. It feels like the district uses virtual learning as an easy solution to their chronic staffing problem. Our staffing problem is nothing new and was present prior to COVID-19. CCSD has historically struggled to recruit and retain qualified professionals. Your response to crises in our buildings has only made that problem worse, and some of these crises are in fact created by you. As a parent and stakeholder in this district, I want to know that you are making every possible effort to keep every school open. The data from 2020-2021 shows us just how much virtual learning failed our children. It failed my son. Virtual learning is no longer an option. Virtual learning is a lazy solution to a problem that has persisted for years. Our district administration has continued to hire more staff to sit in offices and tell our schools how to operate. If our schools need bus drivers and substitute teachers to stay open, then I want to see you on the front line to make that happen. I want to hear that our leadership is subbing in classrooms and serving lunches across the district because they care that our children receive a quality in-person education. Our kids deserve to go to their classroom to learn every day, just like the private and public schools around us. They do not learn through a screen. You need to work to come up with immediate solutions to this problem. You need to communicate better and show with your actions that the stakeholders in this district, employees and families, are valuable, that you care about our opinions and consider our input to be crucial in decision making. I believe that if we work together, we can make CCSD a place where people want to work and learn. The LSGTs, PTAs, and parent and teacher advisory boards want to make CCSD better every day if you will just partner with us and support us. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is it Difedema Sese? Did I? Okay.
Okay. Good evening. I am a current parent of CCHS and a former parent of Clark Middle. As a former parent of a CMS and a current parent of CCHS, I am here to express my concern about the removal of Principal Pendley from CMS. I am concerned because Principal Pendley is a great advocate for his student. He understands and believes that every student in his building can learn and blossom with the appropriate and equitable access to opportunities. He understands the disparities some students in this district are facing day in and day out. And he's always creating coalitions in a district and communities to address these issues so students can focus on learning and succeed in life. He cares about building trust between educators and students because he knows that without trust, students will not be able to give 100% attention to learning. If you are part of a CMS community and is asking yourself, how can CMS be a better place for all, or how can we support all students to excel, you'll agree with me that his communication styles always leaves you with curiosity to know more and want to move beyond knowing these issues to actions. Principal Pendley is a very caring and concerned citizen, as well as who wants the best for his community. Removing someone of that level of understanding and trust from a school building has devastated and impacted students, staff, and community. Removing Principal Pendley from CMS is not helpful in reaching the goal you all have set up for this district. The way he was removed can be classified as an intimidation, in my point of view. For those teachers and school leaders who want to change the status quo for the good of our student, community, and district, you'll have a hard time recruiting change makers with this attitude. And that will only negatively impact the success of our students today and our community tomorrow. This shouldn't have happened in our district. And I hope this is the last time we experience something like this. I also wish for Principal Pendley return to CMS, as he is one of the best assets to accomplish the vision and mission you have set up. Thank you.
Thank you. Susie Mojak.
I'm Susie Mojak. I'm a parent and on the Clark Middle PTA. This week in our PTA meeting, we were joined by over 120 parents, teachers, and administrators. There was an overwhelming show of support for Mr. Pendley and a great outcry for answers as to why he was removed. We still have no explanation for his sudden and traumatic removal.
We've been told by Dr. Blankenship that a superintendent can reassign a principal for any reason they decide, and that there are no district processes in place for reassignment. However, there are processes in place to terminate employment of a principal. So we asked, why was he not terminated? The answer we were given, because there were no performance issues. This means there was no evidence to support a termination. So why was he transferred? Again, no explanation. We were told Mr. Penley was reassigned at the sole discretion of the superintendent, Dr. Thomas, because she lost faith in his ability to lead, and because a small group of parents complained and threatened to leave the school because they disagreed with the restorative practices used to successfully resolve issues at CMS. This leaves us wondering, because complaints from a small group of parents were a contributing factor in the decision to remove a building leader, then why weren't all stakeholders given the opportunity to voice their opinions after these complaints were made? Why weren't the people working closest with Mr. Penley asked what they thought about the leadership of their principal? Dr. Thomas, Mr. Harris, and Dr. Blankenship have all admitted that this situation was handled poorly, but none have indicated future plans to prevent it from happening again. This leaves the CCSD community to wonder, in whose interest is it to give a superintendent the power to unilaterally decide to reassign a noted successful building leader with no explanation to either school families or to the person being reassigned? I would like to request that you call an executive session to review the actions of both Dr. Thomas and Mr. Gaskins in the reassignment of Mr. Penley. Then report your findings to the community. If poor performance is discovered, we want to know your plan to correct it. The superintendent is your employee. You have been elected to ensure accountability for that office. We all hope for a quick return to health for Dr. Thomas, but we don't know for sure if she will return this year or if she will need to leave again. That makes it even more important to review the current acting superintendent. CCSD is in a very unstable situation. There is zero accountability for the acting superintendent and zero confidence in the promise of transparency of this leadership. Who will make sure decisions are being made in the best interest of our whole school community? These questions will keep coming until they're answered, and it is quite literally your job to do that.
Thank you. Molly Sherman?
All right. Good evening. My name is Molly Sherman, and I am the induction coach at Clark Middle. I've served in many roles in Clark Middle and in Clark County since 2016. However, my journey with Clark County really began as a small child. I'm the child of two former CCSD principals, and I am a proud recipient of my Baxter Street education. And I just share all this to emphasize my commitment to and love for the CMS and CCSD community. Its students, teachers, and staff have been instrumental in my personal and professional development, especially during the past 6 years. And so my commitment to our students, families, and teachers brings me here today. Because of my loyalty to our school community, I'm speaking on behalf of Mr. Christopher Penley, the former principal of Clark Middle School. Since everyone here tonight has spent varying amounts of time in our school building, I'd like to share some insight with the individuals here regarding the impact of Mr. Penley as a leader during his time at CMS. As y'all know, the impact of a leader is a combination of a million different things, both big and small, and I want to ensure that the massively important work Mr. Penley has done and is doing is clearly spoken. So as a leader, Mr. Penley invests time and energy into every single one of his teachers. He has a keen ability to recognize unique strengths and abilities within his staff, and he's committed to leveraging those to help teachers reach their professional goals. As we all know, he's honest, open, and transparent with all stakeholders. He welcomes open dialogue and communication in an effort to collaboratively problem solve with students, teachers, and families, and the district too. He's thoughtful and reflective in his work, and he shares his reflections through poignant and encouraging letters with his staff. and reminds teachers of the purpose and vision behind the important work we do as educators. He centers the importance of community and collaboration at the heart of what he does, and most importantly, he's deeply committed to the CCSD community and is a true advocate for taking any path necessary to help every child succeed. So I could go on with this list, but unfortunately, time doesn't allow me to do that this evening. What I would ask you all to consider is the impact that the sudden removal of Mr. Penley as the leader I just described above has on a school community, especially one that respects and values him so much. I would ask that you provide answers and clarity for a community that deserves so much more than we've been given. It is the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Lindy Miller.
Good evening. I'm Lindy Miller, and I have a child in 5th grade at Chase Street Elementary and one in 8th grade at Clark Middle. My children both started in CCSD in kindergarten, so this is our 9th year in the district. I regret that I didn't come here earlier to sing Chris Penley's praises before Dr. Thomas decided to remove him as principal of Clark Middle. Mr. Penley is probably the best leader I've encountered in this district. His vulnerability, transparency, compassion, and commitment to do right by all students has been life-changing for my family. His weekly emails taught our community about equity and communicated his vision for the school culture, a culture where everyone belongs. He invited us to spend time in the school to see that culture for ourselves, took him up on that invitation, and have participated in meetings, student incentive days, athletic events, principal coffees, holiday markets, and teacher appreciation meals. I love being in that school and witnessing firsthand the culture that Mr. Penley and these teachers have cultivated. I'm worried about the teacher morale and retention at CMS and the rest of the district after Dr. Thomas removed their leader in such a disrespectful manner. The district created an atmosphere of chaos, confusion, and distrust. Several speakers spoke at our meeting this week with Mr. Gaskins and Dr. Blankenship. They courageously shared their fear of reassignment themselves as they were aligned with Mr. Penley's methodologies. Several teachers transferred to CMS this year to work specifically with him. What will the district do to retain our wonderful teachers committed to equity after removing their leader? There's already a teacher shortage. Why would the district remove a respected leader and risk a higher turnover rate in the next year? The turnover rate at CMS improved under Mr. Penley's leadership. At his last principal coffee, Mr. Penley said one of his highest needs is more teachers. There are too many long-term subs in the building who don't have the classroom management training that they need. We can't lose more teachers. We have to do better. Ask that you take the topic of Mr. Penley's reassignment to executive session with Mr. Gaskins or Dr. Thomas when she returns to hold them accountable for this decision and the chaos it created.
Thank you. Rebecca, is it Glennie?
Hello, and thank you for having me here tonight. My name is Rebecca Glennie, and I teach at Clark Middle. I do not think I'm capable of speaking more eloquently than my coworkers, and assume that many of us have the same frustrations. However, I am here because I feel that on certain occasions, hearing from many stakeholders stresses the importance and the pain of a decision. The CMS school community was shaken by the decision to remove Mr. Penley. Many remain frustrated, but what feels like an abrupt and unilateral decision to remove a great leader. The choice has hurt teachers, students, and our community, leaving many of us to feel that the district does not care about those their actions impact. Some of Mr. Penley's strongest qualities are his transparency, accountability, and willingness to engage in difficult conversations, which makes it feel even more hypocritical when it feels like no one is willing to take accountability for the decision or justify actions. This impacts my ability to trust those who've made this decision. As an educator, I've always been taught to end with a positive note or a solution, but at the moment, I don't see one until there is greater accountability or a willingness to engage with stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you. James Miller.
So my name is James Miller. I would like to identify traits that I would like to see in our next superintendent. As a community member, a business owner, and a parent of 2 kids in CCSD for the last 9 years, I believe my opinions on the traits we need in a superintendent are no more valuable than anyone else's in the CCSD community. I have my own perspectives on the kinds of traits that good leaders exhibit, but I recognize they are not necessarily shared by all in this community, this room, or even on this board. I believe there is a cancerous notion within our community that what should matter most is the experience, well-being, and opportunity of my child as a parent or a guardian. It is unfortunately the case that the centering of one's own experience leads to a perspective that any other student, teacher, or administrator that negatively affects my picture of how my kids' experience should be like should be removed. Whether it's the suspension of a student, the reassignment of a building leader, or the conversion of farmland into suburbs, the belief that the problem needs to be removed or left to fend on its own without my support or tax dollars is crippling our opportunity to meet the needs of our children and our opportunity to thrive as a community. I recommend that we seek out a leader who demonstrates the courage to face this reality head on with the values, background, and skill set grounded in community building. If we're going to thrive, we need a leader who is willing to be vulnerable, who is willing to admit mistakes, who is open to feedback, who advocates for the well-being of teachers and students, and who is committed to giving all kids in our community the opportunity to be a part of that vibrant, diverse, complicated, messy, beautiful community where you belonging isn't dependent on your behavior, where your opportunity is not limited by your intellect, and your future is not thwarted by leaders who prioritize ego and power over service and compassion. If you need an example of this type of leader, I would encourage you to look at one of your beloved district employees, Chris Penley.
Thank you. Charles Hardy.
How everybody doing? I had originally came down here to speak on moms and dad demand action, but after speaking with a few people today, we got the situation straight, and we're gonna go back to the meeting room and get everything straight. I want to thank Mr. Fisher, Mr. Harris, for assisting me with that today. But since I'm at the podium, I want to say this: I had a chance to work with Mr. Penley. And if y'all can't see this, just looking at this front row right here, this is to show the support that this man has. I have worked with him personally myself, and he's a great principal. I've been working with kids all my life. I'm a counselor at a group home now, so I work with kids all the time. I have never seen a principal in Athens, Clark County as good as he is with kids. And for him to be left out there like that, I just don't understand it. So that tells me it got to be something dealing with inside the administration to let a principal go that has so much power, not just over the kids. Look at the front row. His whole staff is here. We need to correct this. We got to correct this. It got to be corrected. It needs to be corrected. We owe him that. We owe these teachers that. We got to fix it, y'all. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris Woodward.
I've written at least a dozen letters in preparation for tonight's meeting, never able to find an entrance that leads to the larger conversation I believe we need to have as a district. I sat down and wrote about our sub shortage and our continued use of ESS despite their failure to sustain contractual sub-fill rates. If there was a will, we would find a way to transition the $250,000 a year management fees into something meaningful for folks in our community working as subs in our schools. This school year, ESS started with 100 subs, and this is our third year, $750,000 in management fees. I understand they've grown that number, but when do we grow an interest in leveraging what we spend to impact the lives of families in our community? But leadership includes this in their budget, and the board approves it, and we move along. When the issue of inadequate subs is addressed at tonight's meeting, I suspect that it will involve the shrugging of shoulders and the mentioning of this being a national issue. That this is true provides context, but should not be mistaken for a local solution. In a different version of the letter that I'm reading now, I spent my time talking about the space between our district and our kids. While words will be spent in satisfaction with a new board office building, my school is disheveled and in some ways broken. The Clark Middle School was approved in the same East Blost as the new board office. But as SPLOST funds dwindled, it was a matter of prioritization, and our school simply did not come out on top. We were put on the list for the next SPLOST, and I look forward to experiencing the excitement of a new building. I believe that our kids and staff deserve clean, safe, and functional spaces. In a different version of the letter, I spent much time detailing the months-long lack of soap in student bathrooms. I talked about the number of broken HVAC units and out of commission for weeks and months and questioned how that fits into district's COVID mitigation plans. Other times, I sat down to write a letter, and I couldn't compose anything past publicly processing the abrupt removal of the CMS principal. Many in the CMS community are hurt by this gutting, even as we are thankful for Dr. Gorham's presence and guidance. In a meeting this week, district leadership acknowledged making a number of mistakes in the process and fracturing the trust of the school community. These are truly welcome words, though acknowledging the harm is only the prelude to a first step. True healing does not start until there's a commitment to action. Ultimately, the purpose of my speaking tonight is twofold. First, an appeal for leadership, not the people, but the act of leading. I believe that those in the position of power, Dr. Thomas, Mr. Gaskins, hold a responsibility to our parents, students, and teachers. Rather than uplifting the ideas of stakeholders, far too often we check boxes in this district. Embracing the ideas of stakeholders is not abdication of decision-making. It is a condition of confident leadership. If folks at the helm disagree and feel the community is empowered through their work, I ask there be consideration for a survey, because I know far too many people who would disagree. The other reason why I'm here, however, in good faith, how in good faith can I work to inspire students if I'm not willing to use my voice? How do we build boldness in our students? How do we encourage the audacity to reimagine a better world if we aren't willing to do the same? I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Ashley Na. Ashley's not here? Okay. Brent Andrews.
Hello, Brent Andrews from Cedar Shoals High School. As in dictatorships around the world, CCSD insists on ruling through absolute power and unilateral mandates with no regard for the people and with no responsibility to answer to stakeholders. I don't know a single person who works for CCSD who has faith in the ability or intentions of our increasingly bloated district office. I've seen plenty of dysfunction in my 21 years in CCSD, but the chaos we're currently witnessing is so rampant that I can only assume it is intentional. Our district is on fire, mostly metaphorically, but in the case of one school today, the fire was literal. I can only compare the sweeping cohesion of confounding district decisions to Trump's burn it all down approach. If everything around you is on fire, it's impossible to prioritize what parts to put out and what to attempt to salvage. Teachers and students tentatively returned to face-to-face instruction during a deadly pandemic after a prolonged period of isolation to the tired old policies of test the students, silence the teachers, force mandates through vessels we refer to as principals, and manipulate the data to justify the district's whimsies. District teachers have increasingly lost control of their curriculum and no longer have the ability to make decisions in the best interest of students. When we report an epidemic of student anxiety, depression, and fear of an uncertain future, and beg for the chance to explore creative approaches to improving school climate, we're handed canned corporate lessons about dreaming big. Principals report that they have little to no autonomy to make decisions for their individual schools. Every aspect of leadership must be filtered through one person or a handful of leaders so removed from the realities of our schools that I doubt they've even spoken to an actual student this year. In the recent case of Mr. Penley's removal, it is unclear who even made the initial decision to publicly escort him out of the building through a walk of shame in the middle of the school year. Much less is known about the actual reasons why he was removed. Our community deserves and demands transparency in this matter as well as in other areas. A declaration that this is up to the discretion of the superintendent will not stand. After district walkthroughs last semester, multiple schools in the district were told that they failed district expectations, scored in the 60s, and had much work to do to improve instruction. No teacher received individual feedback on the observations, nor did principals receive observation data clarifying why the schools failed to meet expectations. To meet the ever-increasing and evolving needs of students and families, administrators and teachers must have the autonomy to make decisions about their own learning communities. To gain the faith of staff and community members, CCSD leadership must provide transparency for their decisions in both timely and substantive communication with stakeholders. Most importantly, as the stewards of the education and emotional welfare for the youth of this community, the school board must begin an extensive superintendent search, as Dr. Thomas will be retiring in less than a year. Thank you.
Thank you. Christian Trotter.
Hey, y'all. Last month, I was the only one here speaking, and I came with some concerns about what was going on at Clark Middle School. The primary reason I did, the only reason I did, was because I approached a number of people individually, and I got no response whatsoever, not even an answer to an email. So I came here and I talked, and all of a sudden, people wanted to talk to me. I think only like the 10 people that were in the room at the time actually heard what I had to say, until the video of that night got posted on Facebook, and then everybody saw what I had to say, and everybody had something to say about what I had to say. And a lot of people didn't like it. A lot of people wrote me and really appreciated what I had to say. And one of the incidents that happened at Clark Middle was the one that I think had me most bothered. That was a beating that had taken place. A number of people who were very, very involved in the aftermath of that process contacted me. And the answers that I was seeking by coming and asking questions, which I did not get from this board, and I didn't expect to get from this board because y'all didn't know it was happening either. I started to get some answers from those questions, just from people who came to me after they heard me speak. I feel, a better understanding of what went on in the school that day and afterwards, and actually before, from speaking to those people who were willing to be transparent about what happened. And I would love to see the same transparency now that I was told I couldn't get by officials. They said it's all about student privacy and other privacy, and we can't tell you anything about what happened or how it was handled. Now we're seeing the same thing in the questions about how Mr. Penley was removed. It's, well, we'd love to tell you something, but we can't tell you anything. It's just policy. We can't tell you anything about it. Knowing what I know from the conversations that I've had with people who were closely involved in the situations and listening to people like Mr. Gaskins explaining some of the reasons that things could have happened, I am able, I think more than most, to piece together what actually happened and why it was fairly likely that Dr. Thomas was kind of put in a position she didn't want to be in and had to take an action that she probably didn't want to take, but was forced to. And I'll leave it at that. Now, I did come to talk primarily about the code of conduct, and it is, in my view, it is somewhat lacking because it is so open to interpretation. If there were a more, and I don't have the ideas or the ways to go about making this happen, but if it were more defined specifically in how certain behaviors are handled when they come up, it could have prevented all of this. Instead, there were some mistakes made in interpreting the code of conduct, which were illegal, and could have led to all of this. And it could have been avoided if there were just better understanding and better clarity surrounding the code of conduct. Thank you.
Thank you. Graham Jarbo.
Hello, my name is Graham Jarbo. Some of y'all might know me. You probably know my parents at least. I went to CCSD schools, and now this is my third year teaching at CMS. And I just wanted to start off by saying that we really feel thrown into sort of chaos at CMS. And the biggest part of that to me is, how are we really supposed to trust the decisions that officials in our district make? If removing Mr. Penley, who I loved and I thought was a great principal, he really helped me get my start as an educator, was the right decision, then prove it to us. We have the right, and as a democratic institution, we should be told why decisions like this are made. And if you can't justify your decision, then it doesn't really seem like a decision that should have been made. Any decision like this should have evidence, and the people in this room are competent enough to explain why that evidence matters and why it leads to certain decisions. The last thing I want to say is, I believe that everyone in this room really cares about our community. I know that I believe I care about the community, and I try really hard to show that. But especially for myself, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if we care. It doesn't matter if anybody in here cares. It matters if our actions improve the conditions of the community. It does not matter what we think in our heads. It matters what happens in reality. And so I'm just going to leave you with a quote. Hide nothing from the masses of our people. Tell no lies. Expose lies whenever they are told. Mask no difficulties, mistakes, or failures, and claim no easy victories. Thank you.
Thank you. According to my list, Ms. Palmer, those are all of our speakers for tonight. Thank you so much for speaking and sharing your thoughts and concerns. We will move forward with item 5, and this is the board president's report. I only have one item, and I had it here, but it's just a reminder of our upcoming trainings on February the 17th, as well as March 31st. That February 17th training is policy, and March is parliamentary procedure. And so just wanted to remind you of that. And also, if you have specific questions or areas that you want to be sure are included, like in the objectives of those trainings, if you would just forward that information, you can either send it to me, or I think I included earlier, it's been a few months ago, I think I included us on an email with both Angela, with Angela and I'm sorry, with Julie, yes, about any questions. No? Okay. Well, okay. If not, you can just send those questions and they will be forwarded. Okay. Moving forward to the superintendent's report, Mr. Gaskins.
Yes, ma'am. Just one update. So last week, we mentioned that we were partnering with the Department of Public Health and Mako Labs to provide testing kits for all staff and students. So those testing kits have arrived and they've been delivered, and school nurses have been given them to staff already to self-administer. So any staff that needs a testing kit, they can speak to their school nurse or their school principal or assistant principal about getting the test. And starting next week, these tests will be available to students. The school nurse will be able to administer those to students once their parent has registered them online, and we're going to send out communication to families about how they go about that next week. And then just lastly, we're planning, thank you. We're planning on having a drive-through PCR testing site, which will be here. So the week of January 31st, any staff, family member, student who wants to be tested will have a drive-through PCR test. Well, they can just drive through the parking lot here at HT Edwards and receive their test. And those are all of the announcements that I have.
Did you say the 31st for the
The week of the
testing?
31st.
Oh, the week of the
Yes,
31st.
we're trying to finalize what day, so we'll
Oh, okay.
communicate that once we have finalized that day, but it will be that week of January 31st.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Davis?
Yes, Mr. Gaskins. We've got another email today from a parent. It was fairly lengthy, and they were asking about the options for virtual learning. And we talked about last week. I am totally in favor of schools being open and staying open. But I do believe that we have the resources to have a very vigorous virtual learning environment for those parents that opt for that choice. And so I'm still baffled at that kind of continuing emails that we're getting from parents that's not being communicated. I know that we have a high school virtual opportunity, we have a middle school virtual opportunity, and you said that you've encouraged principals to work with our elementary school parents who are concerned. Somehow it's just not getting out. I'm not saying that you're not getting it out, but it doesn't seem to be getting out. So I'm not sure what else can be done, but I would suggest that we do more in getting that word out so that parents don't feel like they're being trapped in a situation that they're not trapped in. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Additional comments, questions about the superintendent's report? Okay, we'll move forward to item 7, and this is the financial report.
I'm sorry, I was reading through the email. What is the process for parents who would like the virtual option? Is there a defined process for it?
They speak directly to their principal.
Okay.
So we can put something in our weekly update tomorrow regarding that. We've had 9 families already reach out directly to their principals and are receiving accommodation in elementary school. So they just need to reach out to their child's teacher, but preferably their child's principal.
And that by email is?
Email is perfectly fine.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Any additional questions? Okay, we'll move forward to the financial report. Any additional information? Okay. Any questions for Mr. Schooneman based on last week's report? Okay, the floor is open for a motion.
I so move.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Davis, a second by Ms. Hull. For the record, any other questions or concerns? Okay, all in favor of approving the financial report, if you would raise your hands and say aye. Aye. All opposed? Sorry. And any abstaining? Okay. All right, we will move forward to our policy exhibits to be adopted, rescinded, revised, or reviewed. The floor is open. For item 1, this is our policy JP, staff student relations. The recommendation is to rescind.
I move that policy JP, staff and student relations, be rescinded due to that information already being included in the code of ethics governed by our staff.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hall. We have a motion. Is there a second?
I second.
Okay, thank you. Any additional questions or discussion? Ms. Davis,
No.
okay. All in favor of rescinding the policy, if you would raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? Aye. And any abstaining? Okay. So that motion passes. JP will be rescinded. We will move forward to policy JHD. The floor is open. Was that you, Dr. Anderson? I'm sorry.
There are 4 policies that can be voted on together if the motion is made.
Thank you for that correction. Policy JHD, JLB, JN, and JQE. Is that okay? So I'm sorry. The floor is open for a motion to rescind all of those policies I just named.
I'm looking at the wrong meeting. Yeah.
I move that we rescind policy JHD, rescind policy JLB, rescind policy JN, and rescind policy JQE.
Thank you. So we have a motion. Is there a second? Okay. Ms. Gallagher. Okay. Any follow-up questions or discussion? Okay. All right. All in favor of rescinding the policies that were named, if you would raise your hands and say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And any abstaining? Okay, that motion passes. We'll move forward to our personnel recommendations. Mr. Gaskins.
Yes, ma'am. We recommend that you approve the personnel recommendation and also the board addendum.
Okay, so we have a recommendation for approval of items 1, the board personnel report, and item 2, the board addendum. The floor is open for a motion.
Board addendum, okay, we have question. I'll second them. I'll move that we accept that we approve this. And we will have question, right?
Yes.
I move that we approve.
Okay, we have a motion from Ms. Davis. A second from Dr. Anderson. The floor is open for any follow-up questions.
I don't think it's a question. I just want to clarify that this is the clarification that we received in the mail from, yes, Dr. Blankenship. Okay, we're good. Thank you.
Mr. Davis and then Ms. Gallagher.
This is just a technical question, but I see that there are attachments there, but I don't see it on my screen. So I'm not sure why. Yeah, I think.
So if you're logged in, I think, Lisa, under your account, you should be able to see it because the public cannot see it.
It's also in your email.
Okay.
It may have been with your
I
email.
mean, the attachments in the email? No.
Dr. Anderson,
I
could
mean-
you use your mic?
Sorry. Yeah, if you don't see your name in the top corner, the right side of the screen in the blue radio button, then you are not logged in. So then
Okay.
you got to log in and then you can see all the private documents.
I was, but I'm not now. You're right.
Okay.
All right. Any additional questions before we take action? Oh, Ms. Gallagher, yes.
I do. So I see the email, but when I looked at both of those, there was last week there was only one for the Officer of Early Learning. Now there are 2 new positions.
There were 3, and we're down to 2 now, right?
For the Officer of Early Learning only.
Okay. I missed that.
Is that?
Uh-oh. Can you speak in your mic?
If I remember correctly, this is when we were going through and you wanted some clarification on those positions? I believe there were 2 in the last.
No, last week one was the custodian, one was for Class of City High, one's for the Officer of Early Learning. Now there are 2 for the Officer of Early Learning. I was just wanting to get clarification on why there are now two and not one.
Karen is coming up.
She's coming. I thought there were two.
The Office of Early Learning positions are teachers being hired for the expansion program. So they are in fact new positions, but they are a part of that awarded grant. We'll have a total of 28 teachers in that grant.
So the new one is just something
It's-
new that was
it's the
added since
expansion,
last
yeah,
week.
in
Okay.
the addendum.
Okay.
Thank you, though.
Additional questions? Okay, well, we have a motion, a second, and the floor has been open for questions. All in favor of approving the board personnel report and the board addendum, if you would, raise your hands and say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we have, was that one opposed? Okay, and any abstaining? Okay, so that motion passes. We'll move forward to our consent agenda. The floor is open.
I did want to add before we vote on the consent agenda that the legislative agenda has quite a few amendments to it.
Right.
None of them are substantive in nature, but there are some changes. So if you all wish to review those changes before we vote, you have been warned that that just got added to the agenda this afternoon or this morning.
So when we get to the question, can we have a review of those items that were added? Because I saw the email, but I did not have an opportunity to actually read that so thoroughly. So under question, can we talk about number 15?
I think so. I know it is consent. Mr. Pruitt, can you clarify that since this is, it's not substantial changes and it's
Maybe we can
packaged
just-
as a consent? Just want to be
Is it too late to
clear.
pull it from consent and vote separately?
So, yeah. Removing it from the consent agenda would have been the way to get that discussed, but
Right.
now the agenda's been adopted. You can still amend the agenda now, but it's going to take a 2/3 vote.
I move that we remove item 15 and do we need 16 as well from the consent agenda?
Okay, we have a motion to remove items 15 and 16 from the consent agenda. Is there a second?
Monday sent it this morning. I think it's a great idea.
Okay, so we don't have a second, and so that means that motion dies, and so we'll go back to the floor is open for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, Dr. Anderson made a motion, Ms. Hull a second. All in favor of adopting the consent agenda, if you would raise your hands and say aye. Aye. All opposed?
Aye.
Okay, that's one. And any abstaining? Okay.
Did
Well-
it carry?
I'm sorry, what was that?
It did carry. Okay.
Yes, it did. Was that what you were asking, Ms. Davis?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, yes, it did carry. So all of those items are, those consent items have been approved. We'll move forward to item 11, and these are our action items. Starting with number 1, our emergency purchase of 100 air purifiers.
I move that we approve the purchase of 100 air purifiers.
Okay, we have a motion by Dr. Dykeman, A second by Dr. Anderson. Any additional questions? Mr. Davis?
I'm just concerned about back order. You know, if we're ordering something that we're going to wait 3 months for. Good. Boy, that's quick service.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, all in favor of approving, excuse me, the emergency purchase, if you would raise your hands and say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Same signs. And any abstaining? All right, so that motion carries. Moving forward to number 2. These are the action to approve the drywall and acoustical ceiling quote. The floor is open.
I so move.
Okay, Ms. Davis, is there a second? Okay, a second by Dr. Anderson. Floor is open for questions or comments. Okay. All in favor of approving the drywall and acoustical ceiling quote, if you would raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, the same sign. And any abstaining? Okay, so that motion carries. Excuse me. Let's see, we'll move forward to number 3. And this is approving the RFP process for the superintendent search. The floor is open.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Floor is open for discussion, questions, and comments.
Just one comment. Did everyone see Kara's email where she included the information about the GSBA process for the superintendent search before we do the vote? Just so it's an FYI.
I did. And I also researched their ability to do a national search, and that seems to be tied to NSBA. And GSBA removed itself from NSBA. We have no standing with NSBA. And I don't know how GSBA will address that gap. I would consider it a gap if they can't do a national search.
Yeah, I do also want to add my concern. I want to piggyback off of what you're saying, because the 20, I think 3 or 4 states that removed themselves from NSBA, it looks and it is a very philosophical sort of political idea. So this working with GSBA seems to me to align a lot with these philosophical differences that are splitting our country right down the middle. And I just don't want to be a part of that. So I just kind of wanted to add that.
I also wanted to say that I don't know if you got this information from that video that was on that website, but at first I also thought it said that the national search came from affiliation with NSBA, the National School Board Association, but it actually said that it's an affiliation with the National Superintendent Search Association, which is different than the NSBA. So I'm not sure if that's what you were referring to, but that was something that had struck me as well. And then also, so just for transparency, I will not be voting for an RFP process, because I feel that we should work with GSBA in order to find a new superintendent. They have an entire search process. We've been working with GSBA for the last over 2 years. As a school district, they know our district, they know our strengths, they know our weaknesses, they know a lot about us. Lisa also sent out a table that showed the timeline for what it would look like if we start the RFP process, and also the cost of using a private firm that we might select through the search process. And then also the timeline and the cost for GSBA, which is substantially less. So those are just my reasons for why I will not be voting to for the RFP process.
Mr. Davis?
I want to echo what Kara said as well, and especially since I've been through the headhunting process from a private firm that had fingers in a number of different pies that we didn't find out about until later. When you go to a corporation to find a superintendent to lead a school district, and that corporation is from out of state and have connections, financial connections in the cases I'm talking about, with different types of school programming and that type of thing. I felt like, having gone through the process, it was a real dog and pony show. And as a board member, yes, we were talked to. Yes, the community was contacted, and there were meetings with the community. But reflection back, I felt like I was kind of a puppet on a string where I was dictated what questions to ask. So I just have a real confusion as to why, having, as Kara said, worked with the Georgia School Board Association for the last 2 years to kind of get our act together, why we would kind of turn the most important work that we do, as Linda would point out, is to hire a superintendent, and why we would even contemplate going through a dog and pony show. I also think that that even though, and I was not pleased with the split with the GSBA, and I talked to the executive director about GSBA about that split with the National School Board Association, and I agree with what Mumby said in terms of, yes, to me it was a political act. I agree, but that does not mean that the folks who we've been working with and who are been engaged in superintendent searches throughout the state, that would disqualify them from being able to do a national search. If we were talking about 50 years ago, where everything was being done kind of like who you know, that type of thing, I could see your point. But in the age of social media, when we advertise for a superintendent, anyone who wants to be a superintendent in Clark County, we will know about it.
For that reason, I would love to see us have autonomy in this selection process. And so partially, it concerns me that there's a big, strong energy in our community around doing things locally. There's a strong energy in our community about hiring and promoting from within. And if we are going to do that, then I think we need a directive from this community at large, and not a select group of people. I think with GSBA, and again, I didn't see a video, I read and I did a search on the company that they listed as being their partner in doing the national searches. And when I clicked on that link, it took me to NSBA. And so that is where I got my information, not from watching a video. And again, I didn't have time to explore that because it came kind of late for me in the day. I don't have an objection to GSBA being considered along with everyone else. It's an RFP. GSBA has the means and the wherewithal to respond, and if they do not, then why are they in that business? And so then we will make a choice based on, again, the company that can do the search based on our criteria. I did not have a sense of being a puppet and being led through a process that I had no knowledge of by the previous two search firms, the search firm that did the last two superintendent searches. I was very, very much impressed with the amount of information that they provided to us and the length that they went to try and reach every aspect of this community. So I appreciated the thoroughness of the work that they did. And my experience comes from, of course, my corporate background. And so I felt that we were treated as customers, and we were given information We sat in a room, we decided what questions we would ask. We divided those questions up. So I didn't feel the sense of being puppeted, but I did feel the sense of being directed in terms of here's some choices that you'll need to make. And I really appreciated that. I guarantee you that GSBA will do the same thing. I don't think that any company is going to do it any differently. The question is, who can best determine from our board and our community what we want in a superintendent? And so I don't know that it's GSBA or not GSBA, but I think we have planned to spend, or we've approved the expenditure of $300,000 for a disparity study, and we keep avoiding the process that we're trying to equalize or bring equity into. So I don't get it. I really feel like we need to be consistent in our process. So that's why I feel the way I do.
Any other thoughts?
I mean, I have this concern that if we're only looking at I don't have anything against GSBA. I love our work with them. But if we move in that direction without having given any consideration or even talked to them to see if we are aligning with what their values are and what we need them to do, we haven't even had a conversation with them. So we're going to think about voting this RFP process down and then contracting with GSBA sight unseen. That just seems really odd to me that we would do that or even consider doing that. GSBA can add themselves to the RFP just like anybody else and then go through that vetting process where we at least get to understand if our values align. Right now, we don't have any idea except for a video and some content on a website. That concerns me.
And one of the things that was shared too, that the GSBA, they will do an RFP. And so I think typically that is, well, I don't know if that's like the majority of what happens often, but, if there is a process out there, they'll respond, or they can respond to the RFP. So. Any additional questions? All right. Did we have a motion? We didn't have a motion, did we? We did? Okay.
And a second, because we're discussing.
Okay. I do have Hull here. And you did the second, Ms. Davis?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So all in favor of approving the RFP process for the superintendent search, if you would raise your hands and say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The same signs? Okay, we have two opposed, and any abstaining? I'm so sorry. Dr. Maddox? Dr. Maddox?
She hasn't been voting. Did she text you maybe?
Can you come up here and double check? I want to be sure. I want to be sure that the number's still on the line. Okay, so we'll figure that out, but we voted, right? Sorry.
We voted and it carried.
What was that?
We voted and it carried.
Okay, the motion carried. Thank you, Ms. Hull. We will move forward with item 4, and that's the approval of the SRO contract with Athens Clarke County Police Department.
Oh, I move that we approve the contract with the Athens Clarke County Police Department.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Davis. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Dr. Dykeman. The floor is open for any, excuse me, any further discussion, questions, or comments.
Mr. Davis.
Mr. Davis?
As far as I can tell, I did ask Chief Spruill for some data, and I haven't received it. So that, that's one reason that I'm going to be voting against it at this time. I'm certainly willing to reconsider it once we find out more information. There is one question that I will, and I'm not going to ask Mr. Gaskins now, and I'm not sure that he would be the right person to ask, but is the process by which law enforcement get into a situation. In other words, how they are called to a scene in the school. And so I apologize for not asking that in advance, but I'm going to be voting against it at this time.
Mr. Davis, I answered your question. If you go back to the board questions that you all sent, I answered that question for you today.
Oh, did you?
All right. And so while we're waiting.
I did have a comment.
Okay.
I really appreciated Chief Spruill coming and speaking with us and clarifying a lot of questions that I had. I would just say as a comment that I will look forward to Dr. Watley reporting on a strategic priority update about what steps have been taken to make sure that all of this work that we're doing with our restorative practices and discipline transfers over to our school resource officers.
Thank you. And I'll just add, I know I share as well, it is something I'm uncomfortable with, and I do want to add just some clarity. And thank you, Mr. Gaskins, as well as Chief Spruill, for answering the questions and coming last week. I do agree that in the future, I think it could be useful to have, if the board and district would approve that, further conversations. So I've done a lot of work with our SROs, more so, I guess, in the high schools. And they are assets to the community. So my hesitancy is not there. My hesitancy is where this fits in the larger conversation regarding where we're going with discipline and climate and culture. And, just what we know is that those conversations have to be, intentional. And there are a lot of ways in which, SROs, build relationships and things of that nature. And so my hesitancy is not necessarily of approving it. I just want to be sure that we are having the conversations. I know that the last time we spoke about this, I think it was maybe last year, and so much has happened. I mean, it's impossible to remember everything, but our goal was or the district's goal at that time was to have I don't know if it was a steering committee, but certainly starting those conversations. And I did see in our board update that those would be coming. And so I just want to give some context that, perhaps later in the year for me, is not a matter of not wanting SROs. I think we have a very strong group. Typically, it's just the desire for more conversations and a strategic direction around where we're going with discipline and the outcomes and all of the different parts that intersect and impact discipline.
And can I ask, what is the time sensitivity of this item? I know that it's for the 2022-23 school year, right?
So it would start next year, but of course we would start planning as soon as we could. And so I just took a note for Dr. Watley about the scope of sequence of what that training would be, and if we would need to have additional funding in our budget to do that. So, I want to say as soon as possible, but we do have some cushion. But as we delay it, that might delay some of the things that we as a district and the board might want to do to support the professional learning of our SROs.
Ms. Davis.
So my most recent recall of this is when there was a big defund the police, a movement, and we had a huge meeting with all safety concerns in the district. And we decided then to continue the SRO contract for some specific reasons. And so I would hope that there's some place, rather than having to, and again, we weren't invited to the other smaller meeting, but somewhere there has to be some documentation to support our decision to stay with SROs. And if we can use that as our starting point to try and address the concerns here. So if there was no decision to even consider that, from this board, from the previous board. And so we're going to look at that again. I would like for us to maybe push this up further on the calendar, because I understand that this decision coincides with a decision with the Athens-Clarke County budget as they go into their budgeting process. And so it would be nice if we have the questions and concerns about continuing or renewing this contract earlier in the cycle, so that, again, we're not feeling like we're having to hold something up by not responding. And if our concerns are new concerns, then I would love to hear what they are. Certainly. Thank you, because I do read a lot too about other parts of the country where people are trying to make those kinds of decisions. And so I want to know where we are as a community on this matter. And that meeting that we had to continue funding was a community school administration meeting. And I would love to know the outcome, other than the fact that we got the recommendation to renew.
I'll just add, when we talk about community, I want us to look at, I don't want us to look at this contract in a vacuum. I think in addition to the SRO contract, we have very supportive juvenile court judges, even though I may be a little partial, who are really intentional about making sure our children don't end up on that school to prison pipeline. We have introduced different trainings. We have a new restorative discipline position. We just have so many different components that if we work together, this should not be the only thing that decides whether or not our children are ending up on that pipeline. We are finally getting the pieces to put together to work together. And so I'll just put that out there so we don't lose sight of all the different pieces that are working together to help end that school to prison pipeline.
And so I don't know if this is also a piece of information that comes out of the safety committee. I think there is a huge safety committee that addresses these concerns. And so, yeah, we would definitely want to have them at the table in this discussion as well.
Ms. Gallagher.
So I have a question. So I did ask in an email a few weeks ago, but I just wanted to know if we've moved forward on making sure that we have someone, and I know Officer Reed stepped into Chief Sizemore's position, but kind of aligning with what Lakeisha and Nicole were saying, if we are going in any direction, we're going to need leadership. And if we don't have anyone in that position, we just twiddling our thumbs, talking about a budget.
So we have posted that position and we have candidates that have applied. Mr. Fisher and I worked on what that process, that interview process would be with our committee, as well as with cabinet for those finalists. So I think we should have someone to present at our next board meeting for approval for that chief position.
Okay, yeah. And I would feel comfortable is not the right word. I think extending, just the hopes, if I do vote for this, although I may be in the minority, and that's fine, but I really do want to encourage us not to lose sight of I think the community really needs an idea of where we're going and all of the different pieces. We've had some pretty thorough reports and really good work done so far, but there were recommendations regarding policies and procedures and all of those different things that these things would fall under. And I just don't, I don't want us to forget that. I want us to be intentional about that. So. All right, Mr. Davis.
Yeah, I just want to say that the information that was forwarded is gone. So I never had it, so I will have to continue to vote no until I get it.
Okay. All right, well, if there are no other questions or comments, we will, the floor is, no, all in favor of approving the SRO contract with ACCPD, if you would, raise your hands.
Aye.
And say aye. I'm sorry.
Aye.
Okay. Dr. Thomas said, Dr. Maddox said aye. Okay. Any opposed, the same signs?
Aye.
All right, we have 2 opposed. Any abstaining? Okay, so that motion carries. We'll move forward to item 5, and this is approving the FY23 budget schedule. The floor is open.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Hull, a second by Ms. Davis. Follow-up questions, concerns, or comments? Mr. Davis?
Yeah, I'm just, again, have done a wage study. We've been engaged in a wage study for, I think Dr. Blankenship started it certainly at the beginning of the year. And so far, we don't have an inkling about what's in it. And I understand, that our CFO's the explanation. I understand that, but I'm just not satisfied with it. So thank you. I'm just going to be voting no for that.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Any other questions or comments? All right, all in favor of approving the FY23 budget schedule, if you would raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, the same signs. Was that in favor of, Dr. Maddox? Okay. Any opposed, same signs? Okay. Is that 2, and any abstaining? Okay. Ms. Palmer, did you get those? Okay. All right, and I just want just for the record, on that RFP, Dr. Maddox voted no on the RFP, but there was some technical difficulties. So I wanted that to be noted in the record. We will move forward with item 6, and this is our policy BBA revision. The floor is open.
So when I raised this concern, it was again because of our lack of continuity. My concern is that we have had a number of superintendents in the last 12, almost 10 years now. 10 years that I've been on the board, we've gone through 4 superintendents. We have gone through 4 different boards. And we put a policy in place for term limits to, again, I think as I read our emails today, it was to give other people an opportunity to serve. And I would suggest that that's probably a fine, noble idea, but we have the opportunity to do that by simply electing a new board president every time we have an election. And we have been having these elections every 2 years since I've been on the board. And people have chosen to elect the same person over and over again. But and a lot of that was, again, due to, I thought, continuity and experience. I'm not suggesting that experience is the number one thing that we need to have in terms of a board president, but I am suggesting that as we go through another year of uncertainty, and especially as it relates to how we're operating, and we're losing another superintendent, and we're doing a superintendent search, it seems to be a little bit much to add into that, ramping a new board president up. That's just my personal opinion. And I don't have a lot of support from a lot of people, but that's fine. I just feel like there needs to be some continuity at some point so that we're not trying to manage 5 irons on fire at the same time for a board that only meets twice a month to try and run the affairs of a district this size. I would like for us to, again, extend for this session, suspend the rules, and allow our current president to serve 1 more term. That was my thinking behind those my recommendation.
Okay.
I'd agree with that. I think that just in my limited time on the board, the idea of having a new president step in, especially someone who was actually nominated, I can't imagine drinking from that fire hose at this time. I think that having the ability to have a board vote on who they feel should serve in that capacity without term limits gives us the strongest power and ability to make sure that we're moving in the right direction, and to exercise term limits diminishes that vote and that ability to do so. I do think it's really not the focus of the district, or excuse me, the focus of the board to give people an opportunity for leadership. That's not why we are here. That's not why we are elected. And so being able to look at our colleagues collectively and decide who we think should serve in that position is something that we should do without term limits. So I support that.
Thank you. Dr. Dykeman?
I just wanted to clarify this item. I think it was just a coincidence, right? That this policy was up for revision at the same time that we were having this discussion. So I think it's actually two separate issues. One is whether we want to vote to adopt this policy as it is right now. It's already been out for public comment. And then the second thing I thought when we got to election of board officers would be a time when we could potentially suspend the rules. So I would not, just personally, I would not be in favor of suspending the rules to change the policy right now, but I would be in favor of suspending the rules to not get rid of, but to not have the term limit affect the election of board officers. Does that make sense?
Agreed. And I know that we went back and forth about this in email. But yeah, it's just a coincidental thing that this policy was up for revision. And so tonight's discussion, while I do love the fact that we're exercising our thoughts on that change in general, tonight's discussion is about suspending that rule for tonight. But that doesn't mean that the public will not have an opportunity to comment on any possible permanent revisions to this policy. It just means that collectively we possibly feel, depending on our vote, that continuation and a smoother process for this board to govern itself will happen if we maintain the current leadership. I just wanted to throw that out there that, yes, I agree with Kara that that's what we're doing tonight.
I think so. And Dr. Harris and Mr. Davis chime in with the policy, the last little bit of policy committee we had. I think definitely policy BBA was up for revision coincidentally, and it would have just kind of gone through. There was no public comment on it. But there was a discussion to actually change the policy and revise it. And due to our new policy adoption policy, we could still change the policy and send it back out, because it would essentially be kicked back to the board, and then we would have to vote on it again. So there is the opportunity. So I did want to clear it up because it was a coincidence, but there was some other discussion that I thought that would make a substantial permanent change to it. And now we're also talking about suspending the rules tonight. So there are a couple of different things that can be done that we discussed. That I'm fine with whatever the will of the board is, but I did want to put that out there, that there are a couple of different options that we will have.
So I don't and thank you guys for really clarifying that for me, because yeah, I'm totally in favor of both, quite frankly. So the first one is certainly to be able to suspend it for this current situation. And then the second thing, that if we're talking about a revision to the policy, my revision to the policy is to limit the term limit to 2, a minimum of 2. It takes 2 years to even understand what we're doing here as a board and to actually get into this whole leadership thing of being a board president, I think, or that's what it seems to be in my observation. So I would like to, if we're saying that this action item is really 2 parts, then I'd like for us to separate them.
I think I think they are separate. In item 6 with policy BBA, the revision, I
Okay.
think right now, that discussion is, do we want to, whatever the motion may be, do we want to accept the revision? Do we want to put this on future business? Do we want to have it on, so that it goes back through the process, like a work session, and then back out for public review? And so that's 6. So I think that's where we are right now with policy BBA.
So then how do we send it back, back through the process and back for public, for whatever? What is the method for doing that?
My understanding is that we voted down. If we don't vote to revise it, then it doesn't carry, it doesn't go into effect. And so it's essentially kicked back down for us to discuss it during a work session before we revise it and kick it back through our new policy adoption.
I'm having my Groundhog Day experience. The attorney has
Mr.
his-
Pruitt.
I'm sorry, but I had no idea that there would be a proposal that it had taken this direction. The last I heard was it was suspending the rules of public comment under BDC to change the policy. I'm sorry. So Robert's rules divides out rules that can be suspended and rules that cannot. Rules that can be suspended relate to parliamentary procedure, such as putting it out for comment. Rules that can't be suspended are the substantive rules within your bylaws, which would be policy for us, that go to the substance of the motion. So I don't think you can suspend the rules to ignore your policy. You can suspend the rules that relate to the method of changing your policy and then change it.
I want to
Clear
be
as mud.
I want to be clear. I understand. And so you're referencing what policy BBA, Mr. Pruitt, about the process there.
Right. So what you have there is an item to consider changing policy BBA. To do that tonight, you need to suspend the rule of public comment on policy changes, which is provided for in policy BDC. Requires a 2/3 vote. What you cannot do, in my interpretation of Robert's rules, is not change your policy, but just say we're going to ignore it for this particular matter.
That's the one I want.
Is there a world that exists, and I'm just thinking out loud here, so let me know if I'm babbling. Is there a world that exists where we change this policy for the function of tonight's meeting and then kick this policy back to the board at our next work session for further discussion and a potential vote again once it goes out to public comment? Is there a world where we could do those things?
Sure, I guess you can change the policy and then immediately go about changing it again. I think that's what's being proposed.
That's what I would like to propose.
So we would change the
And I know it
policy.
sounds kind of funky.
Okay. So we would change the policy tonight, suspend the rules that allow for public comment, vote on it, and then the option would be to revise it again. Okay. I'm just making sure I'm clear.
Mr. Davis?
Do the members of this esteemed board really think that makes sense?
Yes.
Are you
I don't.
actually talking about I mean, tonight we heard people talk about being transparent. We had person after person say, we want things to be transparent. Now what we're doing is that we have a policy, we're going to suspend the policy because we want to do something, and then we're going to put it back in place afterwards.
And the transparency is happening in this meeting right now.
And none of this is going out for public comment.
It will go out for public comment.
Once you've made the change and got what you wanted. Mr. Pruitt, with all due respect, I mean, what may be legal may not be ethical. So I'm I'm just astounded that this would even be contemplated, this approach.
Duly noted.
Okay. So we are we're at item 6. I don't have a motion recorded or a second quite yet. So that was discussion. The floor is open for a motion.
I don't know how to phrase this, but I'd like to move that we revise policy BBA and vote on and suspend the rule to put it out to public comment.
Okay.
Are those two different motions?
I think so.
Those can be combined, and they
Oh,
typically are in this
okay.
context. And just to add specificity for Dr. Harris, the particular revision would be to remove the last sentence of the first paragraph in policy BBA where the term limits are contained.
Correct.
Second.
Okay.
And so the wording here, if I'm reading it correctly.
And I'm sorry, let me interject. Real quick, Ms. Davis. Ms. Palmer, could you come and help? Dr. Maddox was kicked out again. It's saying busy. Okay, I'm sorry, Ms. Davis.
So the sentence that we're talking about reads, in an effort to provide each board member the opportunity to serve, no president or vice president shall serve consecutive terms in the same position.
That is
Yes,
correct.
that's correct.
And I shall point out that this is one of the very few policies that deal not with the substance of our policy and how we govern our superintendent who governs the district, but this deals with how we govern ourselves. So it is not at the same level of other policies that we need to make sure are put out for public comment. And we had a thorough discussion about that at the last work session.
Thank you.
Okay. And so we have a motion. Was there a motion?
A motion and a second.
And a second. Further questions? Mr. Davis?
Further questions? Mr. Davis?
Yes. I'm sorry. So, stuff going on over here.
Yeah, that explanation, and I tried to address it earlier today, more discreetly and not in public. But the fact is that to say that this policy, how we govern ourselves, which are the B policies, created a tremendous amount of community opinion when it was first changed to term limits. So to say that this is just our germane and that the community shouldn't be concerned about how we elect our leadership, and that they're not concerned is not borne out in my experience as the second longest board member. The public does care about how we govern ourselves.
I don't think there was a comment that they don't care, but I, in my limited experience as a board member, but extensive experience as someone in the community, don't feel like the constituency support having an effort to provide each board member the opportunity. This school board is not a professional development course or a platform. So if that is the reason that we're holding to term limits, that has no effect in making sure that our students are able to read and graduate college, career, and job ready. That serves as a personal development board so that we each get an opportunity to feel good and to sit at a chair and get a plaque and a gavel. That's not the role of the chair. And while I have much respect for you, Dr. Gant's role as a chairperson, she holds order to the meeting, she gives us agendas, but she doesn't have any more power than any other board member in this seat. So to decide or to make it unethical was the word that you initially used for us to decide who should set our agendas, who should be the person who runs the parliamentary procedure. I think that's a missed call. That's not what I have experienced any of the parents would want. They don't want for me to become president so I can put it on my resume.
And the urgency of this policy revision needs to really be clear to us and everyone. if we do not make these amendments, we lose our president, cut and dry, because she's done her term. We lose her and she's gone. And we have to now then adjust to a whole new president and start this process of learning what we're doing together all over again. That's the urgency right now. And I believe, just like you do, that the public does deserve to have a comment on us permanently revising this moving forward. But the urgency of it, that we lose our current president if we do not do this, to me, that's more important right now. And then we can talk about what we do with the public after tonight.
And so if I may, thank you for your comments. First, I want to acknowledge the awkwardness because we're sort of talking about a position and a seat that I'm in right now. And so I understand that what I'm saying may be interpreted as many different things. And I'm fine with that. Intention and impact, those are different things. I have said before to individual members and at different times that I thought we needed to revisit this policy, that the term limit I did not think was beneficial for the board, particularly at one term limit. And it's not because I am in this seat, at least I hope so. I've tried to do a lot of reflection and I could very well be missing some things. But just during my tenure on the board, just the amount of turnover with the board itself. And so every 2 years, there's a possibility that 40 or 50% of our board is new. Then that comes with the possibility of new leadership. And so I don't think it's an either or. I do believe that people can learn and we can work collaboratively and build skills across each other. I do think that there are so many uncertainties right now as it relates to the process of the superintendent. We also still have an outstanding Cognier report that I think if we do enough reflection, there may be some additional steps that we're needing to focus in on. And so I hope that this is not about me, and I hope I would feel this way about anyone who was in this seat. I do think some continuity is needed right now, and I also think more work is needed on the policy. So I do think I do support what Dr. Anderson and some of the comments that have been shared. And I also appreciate your perspective. Are there any additional comments before we take action to approve the motion that's on the floor? Yes, Dr. Maddox, I'm putting your microphone on now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
I would say, it's not about you, when it comes to my thoughts, but I am disappointed because we're talking about transparency, and this came at a surprise when we've had plenty of time before now to look at this policy, and that's where my concern is. I'm fine, if it goes the way where you chair another year because you have done a great job. But I do believe that the way that this was done, is being done, I do not agree with it. And I just want to make sure you understand it's not about you, my thoughts about you and as a leader at all.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Maddox, for sharing that. Now, this is a sort of a nuanced and complex situation that we're in, and a unique one. So I do appreciate perspectives, even the ones that are different than mine. Thank you so much. All right. Well, all in favor of approving the motion on the floor regarding policy BBA, if you would raise your hands and say aye. Aye. Okay. Any opposed, the same signs? Okay, Mr. Davis is opposed. Dr. Maddox, any abstaining?
I'm abstaining from this vote. I can't do anything with the vote.
Okay.
Abstain.
Okay, and so we have, Ms. Palmer, we have one opposed and one abstain.
So under the rule change we made a while back, so that's 7 votes in the denominator, 6 yes votes, 6/7 is more than 2/3, so it passes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Pruitt, for clarifying that. We'll move forward to item 7, and this is the election of board officers. As I mentioned last week, as we walked through the process, I think Ms. Palmer has already, you should already have your, the ballots. Is that true?
Yes.
Okay, and so if we would take some time to make these selections, and I'm going to ask Mr. Pruitt, if you don't mind being that person, since Dr. Maddox is not here. I think we have to, whatever you're comfortable with, but we can pass them to you. Okay. Oh, yes, I'm so sorry. The candidates that we have for president are Dr. Dykeman, myself, and Attorney Hull.
Who declined the nomination?
Are we doing these one at a time, or are we doing both?
Ms. Palmer is collecting
Okay, thank
president, and then we can pass. And then the vice president candidates. I'm not sure, Mr. Pruitt, can you clarify? I can't remember. Do we need to read the results of this first before we go ahead and take our vote for vice
Yeah.
president?
Yes.
Oh, we do, okay. And I just want to be clear, be sure that Dr. Maddox, I know Mr. Pruitt mentioned a way to be able to submit your vote. And so I wanted to be sure that we mentioned that.
I emailed it to Attorney Pruitt.
Okay, Mr. Pruitt, Dr. Maddox says that she's emailed you her vote.
Dr. Gant remains president by a vote of 6-2.
All right,
And now we repeat the same process for vice
for
president.
vice president, okay.
The candidates are?
I'm sorry, the candidates are Dr. Anderson, Ms. Gallagher, and Ms. Hull. clarifying that I have the list correct. Miss, okay.
And Dr. Anderson is your new vice president with a majority of 6 votes.
All right, thank you. And so we have had our election of officers, and then it sounds like that policy, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, Dr. Anderson, as we prepare for the meeting. So those decisions have been made. We'll move forward to item 12, which is adjournment.
Wait,
Um,
1 second.
oh,
Could I
I'm
make a
sorry.
motion really quickly?
Oh, sure.
Before we move to adjourn? I'd like to move that we take a vote to move to executive session with the understanding that the contents that we discuss in executive session are not going to be reported in this forum tonight, but I'd like to make that motion.
So moved.
And okay, thank you. So we have a motion and a second. Let me defer to Mr. Pruitt because that would require suspension of the rules or no?
Yes, it will require suspension of rules to add that to the agenda. And then if the rules are suspended, to add that to the agenda. Actually, that can be combined in the same motion. So it's just going to take a 2/3 vote. So if Dr. Anderson could add to her motion to suspend the rules, and we also need to specify in the motion the grounds for the topic of the executive session. I don't know if I don't have that list.
I don't
Dr.
have
Gant.
it. If somebody in policy can pull it up, it's for.
Yes, it's in policy.
Mhm.
The language, so I'd like to move that we suspend the rules to amend the agenda. And I'd like to amend the agenda to move to executive session for the discussion of personnel.
Is that okay, Mr. Pruitt? Or would we be best to read the reason for?
That's probably sufficient, but I think.
I'm
let's
sorry, and I
see.
can't. I just didn't have it up in front of me.
Yeah, I don't have it in front of me either.
Yeah, where's the affidavit?
I have it.
Got it. Okay. Can you share that with Dr. Anderson so she can read that as a reason?
No, I'm sorry. The minutes. That's what I need.
To this.
I'm sorry. I'll read it for Dr. Anderson.
Okay, thank you.
As soon as we can get it here. Okay. So that is to discuss or deliberate upon the appointment, employment, compensation, hiring, disciplinary action or dismissal, or periodic evaluation or rating of a public officer or employee, or to interview applicants for the position of superintendent.
All right. So we have a motion to suspend rules and to enter executive session for the stated reason. The floor, is there a second? There was a second, right? Floor is open for any questions, comments?
I'm sorry, does it no longer talk about property and stuff like that? Did I miss that? Or we just
Well,
didn't talk
there are
about?
several other grounds, but I think this is the ground that Dr. Anderson is wanting the executive session for.
Okay, thank you.
All All right. Okay, so all in favor of approving the motion to suspend rules and to go into executive session for the reason stated, if you would raise your hands and say aye. Aye. Any opposed, the same signs? And any abstaining? Okay, that motion carries, and so we will enter into executive session at 8:29 p.m. Oh, yeah. Dr. Maddox will give you a call, okay?